Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Parks and Travel podcast, covering parks, public lands, and historic landmarks across America and around the world. Welcome to Big Blend Radio. Today we're going to go whale watching with Sharon Kurtz. She just came back from Loreto in Baja California Sur in Mexico, and she's going to talk to us about her whale watching adventure. She saw dolphins, she saw whales, she experienced a little history, and of course, if you're in Mexico, good food. But this is definitely a destination to put on your list if you're a wildlife watcher, wildlife enthusiast like we are. And also, if you love parks, because a lot of this was part of Loreto Bay National Marine Park. So, welcome back, Sharon. How are you?
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to be here, and I'm very well.
Well, I love this. We pulled you off of your own podcast with us. You know, Sharon is here every first Wednesday where she wanders the world with Sharon. But we pulled her off because we thought, we've got these other shows that this topic is so important. And I think this is interesting because you went whale watching and there's a season for that, right?
Yes.
But that may shift a little bit with climate change. Did they talk about that when you went out there?
Yes, they've been studying these blue. And what's interesting is there's very little known up until recent times about blue whales.
Mm,
They're so huge. They're massive, and people know very little about them. But climate
mm,
does matter, and they migrate to this part of Mexico for the warm waters to
mm,
mate, to raise their babies, and get nice and fat on the krill that they get before they migrate back. But
mm.
it is making a difference.
So they come down from Alaska and the Bering Sea area, right? And then come down to Mexico and then go back up.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, because I remember watching them even from San Diego. You could see them go through like in the fall and, like the fall, like October, November, and
Right.
then and through maybe April, even, yeah, maybe even, yeah, April or so, the
The blue
latest.
whales also go to like the Channel Islands, right there where you're saying,
Mm,
right along the coast of California. They
yeah,
like it there as well.
yeah, they do. They do. A lot of people go out there and watch for whales, and especially if you could do that from Oxnard and Ventura. They
Yeah.
have some great boats, and the only way to get to the Channel Islands National Park is by boat, so or kayak, if you want to get out there or try swimming, who knows?
Mm.
So that's kind of cool for those who may not make it over to Mexico right away, and maybe if you're in California, this is something you can go see the same whales that Sharon saw. So,
Right.
and you did see whales. You got some awesome footage too.
Well, I have been to Loreto, but not in whale season before, and it was
Mm,
always on my list. I've got to go back because this is just amazing. It's very important. This is like one of the few places where blue whales come and
mm,
where you can actually see them. And
mm.
so I had to make my way back here. And yes, we saw whales, blue whales, we saw fin whales, we saw
Oh,
dolphins, and then
oh.
we we also saw gray whales, but for gray whales, you go to Loreto, then you have to get in the car, 2.5 hour drive to drive to the Pacific side. That is where gray whales come to
Oh,
mate and have their babies.
that's where I'm getting, and it was gray whales, and I'm talking about for San Diego things too. I think we saw more gray whales than blue. So yeah, we need to have a look at the map. We need to all go to the
Yeah,
map and
yeah,
take a look at where you're talking about. So you started off, you went with a geologist, right? Yvette
yes,
Granados, and she's from Visit Baja California
right.
Sur. And everyone, you can go to the website, Visit Baja Sur travel, and then just pick the English side if you speak English, or the Spanish side too. But this is, you started off at the Loreto Bay National Marine Park. So
Yes.
this is, so you also went to you say the gray whale nursery of Magdalena Bay. So let's start off with the Loreto Bay National Marine Park. So is that like right there at the town of Loreto,
Oh,
or?
yes. Loreto is a charming little town. It was actually the capital of the Californias back in the 1600s. So
Oh,
it's not a touristy town at all. And they want to keep it that way. They want it to be a small and there's no like party activity there. So we went first to the Loreto Bay Marine Park, and that is an UNESCO site.
okay.
Cousteau went here back in the day.
Oh.
So we went there first, and you go out to look for whales in these small little boats. You're not in some big cruiser, and Loreto does it right. They restrict so carefully for conservation. You can only go out in small little boats. There can only be so many boats on the bay at a time. And if you happen to find a pod of blue whales, and there are other boats around, they have a way of, some boats hang back. You only have like 30 minutes. And then if there's other boats around, you have to back up and let the other boats have their turn. So they
Okay.
monitor it very closely so you don't scare the whales or infringe on them.
And you have to stay back from them, like there's a distance, limit
No,
as well.
actually, um, like we were out and you wait. They typically surface for about 3 to 5 minutes, and you're out there in the bay. You've gone quite a distance out because the
Mm,
captains, they kind of talk to one another, and you know where a pod was last uh,
mm,
spotted. So we're out there and it's quiet. You're all very quiet because you're just wondering where they're going to show up. And all of a sudden, this tremendous spout comes up. I swear, like 10 feet from the boat. And
wow.
what is amazing, it scares you to death. But they're very gentle, and themselves, they're very quiet. And they're so long that they start to come up, and you see back, 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 and the head goes down. And then after a while, you see a little fin, and then they kind of just very gently go down into the water. So what you really want to see is when the tail flukes come up,
Yeah.
and I sent you pictures of that. But on our day, the blue whales, they were feeding close to the surface. They eat krill. It's just tiny little marine animals, and they were not diving deep. When you really see the tail flukes come up out of the water like
Mm,
this, it's because they're getting ready to go take a deep breath and go way down to the bottom. So
mm,
I sent you pictures so you could see it, but unfortunately we didn't see any big tail flukes,
mm.
but we learned
But you
about
were
them
close
from
to see,
Yvette.
yeah, you get
Oh,
to see them close up. And so that's the thing that's really cool is, in wildlife, I mean, we all go out there hoping to get that, as photographers, yeah, we want but it
yes.
really takes days or months or even years, depending on who, what, and where to be able to get that once in a lifetime, experience. And most times people are living there or really out there all the time to get that. So, but to
Yeah.
be close, I mean, you're in a small boat and these whales are bigger than your boat. And
Oh,
so that,
yes.
kayakers see them. I mean, there was that guy that was in the whale's mouth,
Oh, I heard about that. I read about that. Well, the blue whales are about 100 feet long, and our boat was maybe 15 feet. So just imagine when it came up right beside us with that tremendous force of water, like we got wet. It misted us from his spout. Just think how big he was right next to us or right under us. So it really
Oh,
does, it takes your breath away. You just can't believe you're in the presence of these blue whales.
oh man. Ooh, that's got to be, yeah, it's one of those things where you pinch yourself, right? You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like that about the dolphins, to see the dolphins too. That's got to be pretty epic. You saw a lot of dolphin play.
Yes, we were on our way out to a spot where the captain wanted us to go see a particular pod, and we saw in the distance all this activity, and it was a huge pod of dolphins, and they were jumping there beside me. They were that close,
Mhm.
right next to our boat. They surrounded our boat, and they were jumping and leaping and going beside us and under us, and it really was amazing.
Oh man, that is super, super lucky to be able to witness that. So everyone, this goes until April. So typically, what is it? December through
It's
April?
from January to April,
Okay. Okay.
and that's whale season, and the whole town is geared up for it. In town, you'll see murals of whales on the sides of buildings, and people come in. It's not a party atmosphere, but everyone comes for whale season. So there's lots and lots of vendors who take guests out into the bay, and it's a very exciting time. But yeah,
Oh man.
January to April.
Okay. And then from there you went to Magdalena, right? Magdalena Bay. Um, so did you stay at Magdalena or do you stay in Loreto the whole time?
We stayed in Loreto the whole time because they are prepared for guests. Now there's no big hotels. That's
Mm,
what's charming about it. They're all typically small properties. But we had a van, and Yvette is with the tourism bureau, so she took, I think there were 6 of us in the van with the driver, about 3 hours, 2.5 hours over to the Pacific side to Magdalena
okay.
Bay. And that's where the gray whales are.
Oh, wow. Did you go on a boat there or do you see them from the coastline?
No, you go out in a boat. This boat was slightly bigger, and
Mm,
since you're in the Pacific Ocean, you must wear a life jacket. When we were in Loreto Bay, the weather is usually not so extreme, so we just went in our clothing in these little
mm,
boats. But we went to the Pacific side. You're all in your life jacket, and you go out quite a ways. But there's all these different lagoons for the gray whales use them for different purposes. Some are for raising babies. Some are for juveniles that are acting up and leaping and being crazy. And some are for mating. Those big whales are chasing the female and she's leading them around. So
wow.
anyway, this was how we talked about it. Nature is nature, and you can't call up the whales and say, okay, we'll be there at 11, put on a show for us. So when we went, it was early in January, very early in the season, and we had weather that was almost hurricane strength winds. It was very windy. So we went out because that's what we were planning to do that day, but there were white caps in the
Mm,
Pacific. And it's hard to spot whales with their
mm,
spouts of white when you have a
mm.
white cap.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
unfortunately for us, we didn't spot too many, but we know, Yvette told us later in the season, gray whales are very social and curious, and they will come right up to the boat. You can actually touch them. Uh,
wow.
the mother sometimes they push the little babies right up to the side of the boat so you can get a good look at them. They're not afraid of us at all.
Mm, hmm. That's interesting because orcas, they're talking about how many orcas are starting to come back once they became an endangered species. And we still have only very few of them, but they're starting to really play with the people, fishermen that are out there. Um, and they're starting to go up to boats and push the boats. And it's not exactly a good thing, but they're actually playing games, and they're that smart where they're concocting games to play with the boats. And it's really the moms and the babies that are traveling together, and they have this amazing language, and they play games. And so it's like, oh, and they're curious. And of course, we know orcas are not actually whales. They're not killer whales. They're actually of the dolphin family. So they're all really, and they're all connected, but
Yeah.
they're really smart, and whales are super smart, So I wonder if they're playing games too, with that.
Yeah, we saw a juvenile gray whale. You could tell he was juvenile because he was smaller and he was dark, like a dark
Mm,
blue color. So it was just a little early to see mothers and babies in January. So that's another
mm,
thing to keep in mind. When you go, have a
mm.
few days, that might be a good option. And then
Yeah,
watch the weather report and go on a day when it's not windy and bad weather. But
that's a good advice. Yeah.
yeah, and Yvette, we have pictures that I send you that
Mm.
are called the gray whales do what's called spy hopping. That's when they will launch themselves out, their head straight up and look around. So that is an amazing thing to see.
Well, I want to let people know, your photos and also an article about this are all up on nationalparktraveling.com. So look at the link in the episode notes or just type in nationalparktraveling.com and type in Loreto, Loreto, and Wales, and you'll find the article right there because I know a lot of people are going to want to plan to do this, and again, like a great tip though about going to Channel Islands if that is what is easier for you to get to. do that by April, May too. So you want to
Yes.
do that, yeah, as they start traveling back. So the
Yes.
blue and the gray whales, do they travel together at the same time frame? Kind of.
Kind of the same time. They're migrating,
Mm,
but from different places, and they don't intermix. Now, blue whales
mm,
and fin whales do intermix.
okay.
We saw them both in Loreto, but gray whales are different. And
Hmm.
so they eat different things. Gray whales, how they eat, they're so massive that they don't really play with you because they have to eat. They have to eat to survive. They're
Yeah.
so big, and they dive way down and they
Mm,
put their head on the side, open this humongous mouth, and then they have like a cavity that opens up and they take in all the water and
wow.
then expel it with um, these baleen kind of teeth things. All the water goes out and the krill gets trapped down there. So they
Wow.
spend their time eating to and then another thing is when they have their babies there in Loreto, how they nurse their young. The baby comes right up beside mom, and the baby will knock her head into mom's side, and the milk is so fatty and rich, it will just be expelled into the water like bubbles. And the
Oh,
baby
wow.
will come just eat the bubbles of milk.
Oh, wow. Yeah. How
When you think
interesting. I
about it,
didn't know
there's
that.
no, there's, you don't know how babies nurse on whales, but that's how the water is just expelled and the baby knows to capture it.
Wow. That's fascinating. I had no idea. Yeah. No idea at
Well,
all.
so right
Wow.
after I went to Loreto, I had to go to New York City for a writing conference, and we went to the American Museum of History and saw there they have a sculpture of a blue whale suspended from the ceiling, and it is massive. And I stood under it, and I couldn't believe that I was in a little bitty boat, and that animal, the largest mammal on Earth, was under us.
That's freaky.
Yeah.
I know I've told the story before on the show a couple times or maybe more, but I was on a little rubber dinghy. This was in South Africa in Port Elizabeth with friends who they were deep sea diving and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But my friend and I, Melissa and I, were on this dinghy, and the two guys go to dive in, and they didn't care, and they know how to do all this, but we were surrounded by hammerhead sharks,
Oh
and
my
I'm like,
gosh.
dude, heck no, man. This ain't cool. Like, but they're freaky, but they're really beautiful. Like, it just, but there was like a whole, like, we were just surrounded. And I'm like, how could you guys, dive in there? And one friend lit up a cigarette. I mean, we were, younger and dumb, but, and I'm going, this is a rubber dinghy. There's hammerhead sharks. What are you doing? And I'm seeing these teeth, and I'm like, but it is bizarre when you're in this tiny boat. You got to think about the Kontiki, you know,
Yeah.
how he was,
Yeah.
these little boats and these massive beings, because that's just it's magnificent. They
Yeah.
really are. It's humbling, isn't it? When you
Yeah.
nature
It
is
is.
humbling,
It
you know?
is. Just
That's beautiful.
for me, it just you're quiet, you're just waiting. You don't know where they'll come up. And then when you hear that sound, you
Oh,
just can't believe it.
yeah, we were in Florida a couple years ago. And for those who don't know, Nancy and I travel full time and document parks and public lands and pet sit as we go so we can do our work and our podcasts and hang out with animals. And we were staying in a house on a canal near Merritt Island. And there's, everyone has their boats and everything. And I went up at 5 in the morning because she said that not whales, dolphins come through every morning, 4 to 5 a.m. I'd be out there waiting. And one morning, like you were saying, dead silent. And then all of a sudden I heard this breath of, from coming from the spout.
Yeah.
And it was right there. And it was just like, I don't know. I can't explain that peace and quiet. And then it's like, wow, this being is right here
Yeah.
breathing in this way that we don't, we do, but we don't do.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I know that feeling is just so, yeah, magical. That's awesome.
Well, also, whales are they have markings that make them unique to any other whale. And so when we were looking for the blue whales, Yvette told us that in Loreto, there is a whale. He's called Calabasa. And do you know why? He's on his fluke that comes up. It looks like a giant squash. It's like a,
Oh,
like
okay.
a calabaza squash.
A
It's a
squash,
white
yeah.
marking. So his fluke is very distinctive. And there's experts that come out every year and track the whales and say, no, they know which ones they've seen. And
Mm,
everyone, we were looking for calabasa when we got surrounded by all these dolphins. But
that's cool.
I have the picture of the whale tail of Calabasa, and he's come for 10 years. Blue whales can live up to 40 years and
Mm,
come back. Um,
that's amazing.
it is
Oh,
amazing.
oh, so everyone, you've got to check out Sharon's article on this and her photos, and also go to visit Baja Sur travel, and also keep up with Sharon. Go to Sharon K Kurtz.com oh wow, keep up with her adventures. Good luck. She's all over the place all the time. But before you go, all right, so you had to have had good food and margaritas, right?
Oh,
After a day
yeah.
of whale watching, you wanted sustenance, right?
Yes. Well, Loreto is the most charming little town, and oh boy, do they have good food. There's a hotel there. It is actually the oldest hotel in Loreto from 1967 called the Hotel Oasis. And
Mm,
locally, they have what's called brown clams. Now, I'm sorry, chocolate clams. It's not because they're brown, they don't taste like chocolate, but they're brown and you bury them. So at the Oasis, it's kind of a specialty. They will take these fresh clams and bury them in like a pit of
mhm.
gravel, kind of cover them up, and then cover them with native branches. And that's how they roast for like 45 minutes. And they are the most delicious fresh seafood. You can eat them
Huh.
raw, but I like them this way. And then when you at the table, you have a stone and you just give them a whack and they'll open up and they're so delicious.
See, you want to just whack them open. I
Yeah,
know you.
it's
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
It's like,
You
give me a margarita,
whack.
whack that clam open. Awesome. Well, and that's really a great thing when you're eating local, right? Sea
Yeah.
to plate, right? That
Yeah.
is awesome. That is
But
awesome.
Loreto is really big on diving and on snorkeling and on fishing and
Mm,
on surfing, I believe, as well. So,
yes, yes.
but they deep sea fish, and then oftentimes the little resorts you take your fish in, they will cook it for you, your own fish. So
Mm,
it's a
very cool.
wonderful natural place.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. It's always fun chatting with you
It was
and
great. I
hearing
enjoyed
about
it.
your world adventures. Thanks for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Parks and Travel podcast. Visit nationalparktraveling.com to plan your next park adventure and to see our Parks and Travel digital magazine. You can keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.